Picking back on where we left off, Barbery Lion.
Unfortunately, no matter how strong and independent
This is a thylacine. This feels like a thylacine instead of a Barbery Lion.
an animal is, like wolves or even lions,
Also, forgot to correct this, but it's called a Tasmanian tiger. The thylacine is called a Tasmanian tiger, not a Tasmanian wolf.
no one can stand up to humans with their weapons. And so this animal was exterminated. The last free-living Barbery lion was shot dead in the Moroccan part of the Atlas Mountains in 1922. And this is a picture where the animal is not yet aware of its terrible fate.
It is taken in 1893, so around 70 years before.
The body length of these beauties reached 9 feet, and according to other reports, it was even closer to 11 feet. The weight of large males could reach up to 1,000 pounds. They hunted ungulates and were decorated with a thick, dark mane. In general, they felt great until Europeans came to Africa in the 17th century. At first, people shot the lion's food, but by doing so, they forced the lions to attack their own livestock. And this became a reason for the people to come into conflict with the lions themselves.
These animals, it does explore the relationship between humans and other animals. Like, these animals are just not great.
Some species have disappeared irretrievably and remain only on the pages of history, and some only on the page doing so.
I wasn't aware of it.
Some species have disappeared irretrievably and remain.
Thylacine. Okay. Barbery lion was a population of the lion subspecies Panthera leo. Panthera leo is still around today.
Remain only on the pages of history, and some can be brought back to life thanks to modern technology. Woolly mammoth. Mammoths are
Woolly mammoth. Woolly mammoth went extinct a super long time before photos even existed.
long extinct creatures. Today, they're only talked about in books or drawn in animated movies. However, such pragmatic people as scientists decided to correct this misunderstanding. It occurred to them to resurrect a creature that lived tens of thousands of years ago. With the extinction of these giants, the rich, flowering mammoth steppes disappeared, on which other large herbivores also fed: wild horses, musk oxen, moose. Where they used to live, I mean in the tundra, now there's nothing but frost and ruined flora.
Just get to the quote-unquote photo of the mammoth. There is no real photo of the mammoth.
Of course, it had to be solved. In 2008, a group of Russian scientists set out to do just that. They used found fossils and deciphered their DNA. It was time to restore the mammoth, and 3 years later, the process was 70% complete. It took another 3 years, and now the scientists were already transplanting the DNA they'd recovered into an African bush elephant. And no, nothing like what happened in cartoons or movies happened.
This does not even classify as a photo at this point. It's just classified as some sort of restoration.
The animal didn't mutate into a woolly mammoth before scientists' eyes. Scientists encountered incomprehensible problems that prevented the experiment from succeeding. However, the research team is unlikely to give up on the task. At the very least, they are inspired by others who are already thinking about this discovery in their fields. For example, residents of Russian Yakutia have been specifically
Yakutia. It's called Yakutia. These American pronunciations are just not good. This guy's just proving the point of American stereotypical pronunciations.
preparing a new home for this beast in recent years and are gradually restoring vegetation. Bdelloid rotifers. Now we're going to talk about those organisms, the mere name of which repels. They resemble the most common parasites that feed on someone's blood. However, if it's commonly to destroy parasites and remove them, then on the contrary, they try to resurrect these creatures. And in fact, after reading about their features, I can't understand how these rotifers need anyone's help at all.
Because they don't. Because they don't. They just live on their own. They live on their own. They have their own way of living, like any other organism has.
The fact is, they were incredibly resilient. They didn't care about drought, frost, lack of food, or even oxygen. In such unreal conditions, bedelloid rotifers curled up in a ball and slowed down the process of life activity to a minimum, staying in anticipation of all the best. And then, one day, that moment in their life came. They curled up in a ball and waited, and waited again. As a result, this process lasted more than 24,000 years, until scientists found them in the permafrost. Of course, humans took them to much more favorable conditions.
And you're not showing photos of that thing. You're showing videos and clips.
And guess what? The rotifers immediately resurrected and came back to life, as if they hadn't waited 20,000 years for anything. Previously,
which is cool. Which is quite cool, to be honest.
Scientists believed that these creatures could last 10 years, but now the result's been surpassed thousands of times. The researchers additionally made sure that
more specifically around 24,000 times.
They found really ancient rotifers. Their
not 24,000 times, sorry, 2,400 times.
Genetic material was markedly different from the DNA of modern animals. Selecting 144 revived multicellular organisms at random, the scientists again froze them at -15 degrees Celsius. The ancient rotifers were able to survive again, although they weren't much more frost-resistant than their modern congeners. Hit the like button if you'd like to have such a superpower.
Oh, you're now just showing a movie clip. This video is supposed to be educational, by the way. And you're just casually showing a Hollywood clips that just don't help your case.
Peran IEX.
Peran IEX. The Peran IEX. This is cloned in 2003.
By the way, if any of you still think that neither mammoths nor any other creatures can be recovered by humans, that revival is simply unrealistic, and scientists will only breed a new species anyway, just listen to this story. In the year 2000, the last individual of the Peran IEX subspecies, also known as the bucardo, died. It seemed that was the end of this creature. But fortunately for scientists, some researchers back in the 90s took a few skin cells from a female named Celia for the purpose of analysis and preservation in liquid nitrogen. As you can imagine, this came in handy for biologists, and they were able to reconstruct Celia's DNA, transfer it to domestic goat cells, and obtain about 1,500 embryos. Out of so many options, however, the scientists were lucky in only one case. Just one embryo went through the entire developmental cycle, and the animal was born.
But the animal later suffered from birth defects, from a lung defect. So, yeah. It came back and then went extinct.
Unfortunately, as often happens in such stories, the creature died quickly due to lung deformities.
It's quite hard to actually bring an extinct creature back to life.
However, the very fact that it was born and had a chance to live allows scientists to hope for the recovery of the entire population of the extinct Peran IEX. Actually, it works the same way with other creatures, like it does with this one. Researchers at the Natural History Museum in London have recreated the singing of an animal that went completely extinct more than 115 years ago. The animal in question is a katydid species, which was a distant relative of the modern grasshopper and lived in northern India and Tibet. It was first described in 1869, and since then the creature has never been seen or heard of.
All right. This is called a Proenopsis obscura,
relative of the modern grasshopper, and lived in northern India and Tibet. It was first described in 1869, and since then the creature has never been seen or heard of.
This creature is not okay. This creature is a south insect genus. It's a winged thing, as you can see.
Only a single individual remains, which is preserved in a museum in London.
Okay.
Scientists went there, carefully studied this very individual, digitized it, and created a 3D model. Then, biologists studied in detail the structure of each wing of the katydid, which were responsible for the sound. Experts were able to determine the resonance frequency of the wings and recreate the sound of the insect's song. Because of the thicker wings and living in a cold climate, the creature produces a much lower and louder sound than grasshoppers know to all of us.
So this is one of those few cases where photo here, this claim is legitimate.
Now,
I don't know if it went extinct though.
a team of researchers is about to head to potential habitats of the katydid. If they can't find it here,
Just casually used Jurassic World Dominion out of all of those out of all clips, why use Dominion?
we'll set about recovering the species altogether.
Not Hero Wars ad.
Passenger pigeon.
The passenger pigeon. Yeah, I've heard of the passenger pigeon. The passenger pigeon is extinct. Unfortunate, but there are some attempts of cloning.
As practice shows, a creature like the katydid is not
Probably
the
not.
only one that has wings and is missing.
Oh, all right. There is some passenger pigeon DNA research that could potentially result in some interbreeding.
Among the number of such creatures is the pigeon. No, of course, I don't mean just any pigeon. I'm talking about the so-called passenger members of the family. The date of its extinction is September 1st, 1914, when the last pigeon named Martha died at the Cincinnati Zoo. But the species had been extinct even earlier in the wild, and the last wild bird was shot in 1900. Since people are familiar with the saying, as you
That is called extinct in the wild. That means the animal is still there, but in the wild, the animal is no more. Not just any animal in general, any organism.
you brew, so must you drink, they have,
Species.
as usual, started to revive the birds that they've killed. This work began more than 10 years ago. As a basis, scientists took a related species, the band-tailed pigeon. Generally, the restoration will consist of 5 stages. The first one is dedicated to deciphering and comparing the genomes of the 2 species. On the second stage, scientists will determine which genes in the genome of band-tailed pigeons will need to be edited. The third stage is the actual editing. As a result of the resurrection of the extinct species, birds should appear that are outwardly identical to band-tailed pigeons. But with a new genome, and after mating these birds, revived passenger pigeons will appear. The fourth stage involved the breeding of passenger pigeons in captivity, and at the fifth stage, they're planned to be released into the wild.
How would that work though? It's going to be quite a long process for the passenger pigeons if they are revived to adapt into the wild once again.
Resurrection of the pig. Well, this story obviously will
So this is yet another Hollywood movie clip.
not leave anyone indifferent, so be careful. Its essence is that scientists from the US began to implement the idea of resurrecting dead organisms.
Jeez.
Sounds kind of optimistic and nothing portends trouble.
Oh, never mind. This is a...
However, animals were used for the tests in the first place, of course. What can scientists do without them?
The majority of the clips here are from Hollywood. There's only one actual real-life clip.
In particular, they began testing their device on pigs. The idea of the scientists was that if the creature dies, its heart stops and blood stops circulating.
Okay. The pig did not go extinct, so this is technically not a legitimate spot.
However, the organs are still intact for a while and can potentially work. In this case, it's worth focusing not on the heart, but to offer the body a new engine that will temporarily replace it. To do this, scientists came up with a machine that speeds up the blood in the body and supplies it with additional substances that help in this process. Their machine pumped blood through the entire body, mimicking the pulse. It also fed both the brain and the heart. The 100 pigs that were purchased for the tests died. However, they still had attempts to resurrect. At times, the pigs' limbs twitched, or they came to their senses for a short time. Scientists consider this a great success and continue their research in this area. It's not always the case that people only resurrect those creatures which are long gone. Sometimes it's worthwhile to look at what's happening now and consider saving an endangered species. That's exactly what scientists did with the black-footed ferret.
This is supposed to be animals that went extinct, and I'm sorry, but the black-footed ferret is not extinct.
The cute creature you see.
It's just an endangered species.
The extinction of the black-footed ferret was due to ranchers shooting and poisoning prairie dogs.
Okay. Actually, it went extinct in 1979, but a residual... It didn't actually go extinct. It was declared extinct in 1979, but a residual wild population was discovered in Meeteetse, Wyoming in 1981.
Which these predators fed on. Since 1979, the black-footed ferret had been thought to be extinct, but in 1981, a ranch dog in Wyoming brought home the body of the animal.
And so it did not actually go extinct.
Then scientists collected the remaining population of 130 individuals, and despite the fact that most of them died, they still managed to recreate new representatives of the species. For this purpose, the DNA of an animal that died more than 30 years ago was used.
Oh no. I thought I was going to end part 2 here, but I guess we're going to have to go with a laggy ad. A monster from the past. Well, part 3 is going to start off absolutely great. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you all in part